The morning sun cast soft light across the forest, and Mira stepped out onto her porch with a cup of tea. The lake reflected the early sky, calm and clear, as if nothing had happened yesterday. But Mira knew the day would not pass without attention from Karen. The woman had a stubbornness that went beyond reason, and Mira had learned long ago that some people could not accept the truth when it challenged their control. Sure enough, Karen appeared again, clutching her clipboard. Her face was flushed, and she walked with hurried steps as if the forest air itself annoyed her. Mira stood quietly, her posture straight, her gaze calm. "This is unacceptable," Karen called out. "You cannot live here ignoring all the rules. I have reported you, and the board will take action." Mira held her tea and answered gently. "Karen, the board has no authority over this property. I bought this land legally. The documents are with the county office. You cannot force rules where they do not apply." Karen waved her clipboard angrily. "I have seen houses, I have checked everything. You are breaking the community's order. You are selfish and you refuse to listen." Mira's eyes remained steady. "I am not selfish. I am living peacefully. Your rules apply to houses within your boundary. This cabin is outside it. I will not change it for anyone's comfort, but my own." The officer, who had returned to check the area after Karen's previous call, stepped closer. He had studied the land records and Mira's documents the day before. His respect for her was clear. He addressed Karen firmly. "You cannot enter her property. You cannot force her to follow rules that do not apply. This cabin belongs to her legally." Karen's hand shook as she gripped her clipboard. "But I saw her do this, I saw her do that. She should not be allowed." The officer's voice was steady. "Observations do not make property illegal. The law is clear and the records prove her ownership. You must leave now." Mira set her cup down on the porch railing. She decided it was time to speak clearly and firmly without anger. "Karen, this cabin is mine. I respect nature, my neighbors, and the forest. I ask you to respect my home and my peace. You cannot control me with papers, threats, or complaints. If you return, I will involve the authorities immediately. This is not negotiation. This is fact." Karen stared at her, disbelief in her eyes. She had thought persistence alone could give her power, but now she realized she had no authority. Mira's calm voice, firm stance, and legal clarity made it impossible for Karen to argue. The officer gave Karen one last warning. "Leave her property now. Any further interference will be treated as trespassing." Karen's clipboard slipped from her hands onto the ground. She bent slightly to pick it up but did not speak. Slowly, without another word, she walked back down the dirt road, her steps heavy, her face pale. The neighbors who had watched from a distance murmured quietly. They had seen the entire scene, and their respect for Mira grew with every moment. Mira watched Karen leave. Then she turned to the officer and nodded respectfully. "Thank you for ensuring the law is followed." The officer tipped his hat slightly. "Your peace is protected here. You have nothing to worry about." Mira returned inside, placing the remaining groceries on the counter. She opened her book and finally allowed herself to relax. The sunlight on the porch warmed her face. The sound of the wind through the pines whispered softly. And the lake remained calm, undisturbed by the past conflict. For Mira, the events of the past few days were not just about rules or property. They were a reminder that calm, patience, and truth always win over anger and false control. She had faced opposition before in courts, and now she had faced it in the forest. Both times she had relied on her knowledge, her quiet strength, and the truth. As evening approached, Mira stepped onto the porch once more. She looked at the cabin, the trees, and the shimmering lake. She felt a deep satisfaction. Peace was no longer just a hope. It was hers. Karen would no longer challenge her. The forest, the cabin, and her quiet life were safe. Mira sat in the soft golden light, sipping her tea and watching the lake ripple with the evening breeze. She knew that real peace was not given easily, but it could be kept firmly and calmly, and in that moment, surrounded by nature and quiet, Mira felt the certainty of her victory, simple and complete. The morning sun rose slowly over the lake, spreading golden light across the cabin roof and the tall pine trees. Mira stepped onto the porch with a small cup of tea in her hands. The forest was quiet except for the distant call of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. For the first time in days, Mira felt a deep sense of calm. The events of the past week had been challenging. Karen's persistent visits, her notes, and her calls to the police had disturbed the peace Mira had worked so hard to create. But now everything had been resolved. The officer had confirmed Mira's ownership of the cabin, and Karen had left, defeated and powerless. The forest seemed to share in Mira's relief, as if it too was breathing easier. Mira walked down the steps and touched the wooden railing of the porch. She looked at her cabin, the windows catching the light, the warm brown walls blending with the forest. This place was her home, her sanctuary. She had come here seeking peace, and now she could finally enjoy it fully. The neighbors, who had observed the confrontation from a distance, greeted her with quiet smiles as she walked along the path. They had seen Karen's frustration and Mira's calm strength. Some nodded politely, and a few whispered congratulations. Mira returned their gestures with gentle smiles, but she did not seek attention. She preferred the quiet approval of her surroundings to loud praise. Karen was gone. She would no longer come to disturb the cabin or challenge Mira's rights. The thought brought a warm relief to Mira's heart. She knew that Karen might have tried to create conflict, but truth, patience, and calm had always been stronger. Mira understood that real peace was not about avoiding trouble. It was about standing firmly and wisely when trouble came. Mira carried her tea inside and set it down near the window. She glanced at the lake where sunlight shimmered on the water, and then at the forest beyond. The quiet energy of the woods seemed to fill her with a gentle strength. She could feel the rhythm of life around her, the whisper of leaves, the distant call of birds, the soft movement of water. It was a rhythm she belonged to now, and nothing could disturb it. She spent the rest of the morning tending to her small garden. Tiny shoots of green had grown since she planted them, and the sight filled her with quiet satisfaction. Every careful movement, every choice she had made to protect her home now felt worth it. She planted a few more seeds and watered the soil, letting the sunshine warm her back. By midday, Mira returned to her porch with a book. She read slowly, savoring every word, listening to the forest around her. Time seemed to stretch differently here. The tension of city life, the loud voices and endless demands all felt like another world. This cabin, this quiet forest, and the shimmering lake were entirely her own. As the afternoon passed, Mira thought about the lessons she had learned. Some people try to control what they cannot, and some try to challenge what they do not understand. But patience, knowledge, and calm strength could overcome even the loudest anger. Mira had faced opposition, but she had done so with quiet dignity. Now she was rewarded with lasting peace. As evening came, Mira sat on the porch with her cup of tea again. The sky turned soft shades of pink and purple, reflecting on the lake. The gentle breeze carried the smell of pine and earth, wrapping around her like a protective blanket. She took a deep breath and let the tension leave her body. Mira smiled. Her cabin was safe, the forest was calm, and her life was quiet and full of the simple joys she had always dreamed of. She knew Karen would no longer disturb her, and the neighbors would respect her space. The forest, the cabin, and the lake had become a true sanctuary, and she had earned the right to enjoy it without fear. She watched the sun sink behind the tall pines, casting long shadows across the cabin and garden. The lake sparkled one last time before night fell. Mira sipped her tea slowly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Her home was protected, her peace was complete, and the calm of the forest embraced her fully. For the first time in many days, Mira felt a true smile spread across her face. She was home, completely at peace, and no one could take that away. The cabin, the lake, and the quiet forest were hers to enjoy, and she would cherish this calm forever. Tom sat on the cold city sidewalk, his back against the rough brick wall of an old building. The wind blew through the narrow street, making him pull his worn coat tighter around his thin frame. His coat was faded and patched in several places, but it kept him warm enough to survive the chilly mornings. Beside him, a small keyboard rested on a foldable stand, its keys slightly chipped and worn from years of use. People walked past quickly, wrapped in coats and scarves, clutching coffee cups or rushing to their jobs. Some tossed coins into his open hat with a quick glance. Others avoided looking at him at all. A few laughed when he asked politely if he could play his keyboard for a small meal. "Go beg somewhere else," one man said, shaking his head. "You can't even play," another sneered. Tom simply nodded and smiled faintly. He had grown used to the laughter. It did not hurt him anymore. Few knew the story behind the man sitting on the sidewalk. Tom had once been a celebrated piano player, filling grand concert halls with music that left people breathless. His name had been known around the world, and critics had praised his performances as brilliant and full of life. But fame had not lasted. Battles, both on the battlefield and within himself, had pulled him away from the stage. The war had taken much from him, and after returning he had struggled to find peace. Music had been his refuge, and now the quiet honesty of the streets had become his new stage. Tom's hands hovered over the keyboard, his fingers flexing as if remembering old melodies. A gentle note escaped, soft but clear. The sound felt strange to him at first, as if he were meeting an old friend again after a long time. Slowly he began to play a short tune, simple and unassuming. It was not the grand compositions he had once performed, but it carried feeling. The music was his way of speaking without words, telling stories of hope, loss, and quiet joy. A few curious faces appeared in the crowd. Children slowed their running, peering at the man with wonder. Their mothers tried to hurry them along, but some stopped, unable to resist the gentle music. One elderly man leaned on his cane, smiling faintly as he listened. Tom did not speak to them.
He did not need to.
His music said more than words ever could. A cold breeze swept down the street, rustling papers and knocking over a small paper cup. Tom paused and adjusted the keyboard. His fingers tapped a few keys experimentally, producing small melodic sounds. He noticed a woman walking toward him. Her scarf was wrapped tightly and her hands held a warm sandwich. She knelt down beside him and smiled. "Can you play something for me?" she asked softly. Her voice was gentle, patient, and curious. Tom looked at her surprised. Most people ignored him or mocked him, but she had approached without fear or judgment. He nodded slowly and pressed his fingers to the keys. The first notes were hesitant, unsure, but soon they became fluid, smooth, and rich. The melody spread through the small street, catching the attention of more passers-by. People slowed, some stopping entirely, listening to the beautiful music that seemed impossible to come from a man sitting on the sidewalk. The woman placed the sandwich beside him and sat quietly, watching. Tom's eyes softened as he played. For a few minutes, the street transformed. The sounds of traffic, footsteps, and distant voices faded, replaced by music that seemed to lift hearts and calm minds. When he finished, he looked at the woman. She clapped softly, smiling warmly. "Thank you," she said simply. Tom nodded and smiled back. He felt a small spark of hope he had not felt in years. Maybe the streets were not just a place of survival. Maybe they could also be a place of connection, a stage where music could bring people together. As the crowd began to move on, he gathered his keyboard and prepared for the next song, ready to share his music again, one note at a time. The next morning, Tom returned to his usual corner. The sun had not yet climbed high, and the streets were quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. His coat felt heavier in the damp air, but he pulled it tighter around himself and set his small keyboard in front of him. His fingers brushed over the keys, testing their sound. A few notes echoed softly in the empty street. As he prepared to play, a young woman appeared. Her name was Mia. She had curly brown hair tied in a loose ponytail, and her eyes shone with curiosity. She had been walking past the corner for weeks, always noticing the soft sounds that drifted from Tom's keyboard. Today, something had compelled her to stop. She walked closer, clutching a small paper bag that smelled faintly of bread and cheese. "Hello," she said, smiling gently. "I hear you play every morning. Can I sit here?" Tom looked at her and nodded. He was not used to someone speaking to him so kindly. Most people avoided him or stared, but Mia seemed different. She set the paper bag beside him and sat on the edge of the curb, her eyes bright with interest. Tom nodded again and pressed his fingers to the keys. The first notes were soft, careful, almost shy. Then he found a rhythm and the melody began to flow. It was a simple tune but full of feeling. The music told stories of mornings like this, of quiet streets and unseen beauty. Mia listened, completely still, letting the music fill the air between them. Passers-by began to slow down. Some paused at a distance, curious about the unusual harmony coming from the street corner. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, listen," he whispered. The mother smiled and let him stand still, watching Tom's fingers move expertly over the keyboard. Even the city seemed to hold its breath. When Tom finished the first piece, he looked up. Mia clapped softly. "That was beautiful," she said. "Do you play every day?" Tom shrugged and smiled faintly. "I play when I can. Sometimes for food, sometimes for people who want to listen. Most just walk by. Mia nodded. "I want to listen every day," she said. "Your music makes the street feel alive." She handed him a small sandwich from the paper bag. Tom took it carefully and nodded in thanks. He was not used to being treated with such simple kindness. The warmth of it stayed with him as he played another melody, longer this time, flowing like a gentle river. Each note seemed to paint a picture in the quiet morning. Tom's hands moved with confidence, though still modest, bringing life to the worn keyboard. Mia's eyes followed his fingers. She could feel the passion in every sound, the patience and care that had taken years to develop. She did not speak again, not wanting to interrupt the music. Instead, she sat quietly, letting it wash over her. A small crowd began to gather. An older man leaned on a cane and nodded to the rhythm of the music. A few students stopped from across the street, curious. Some of the people who had laughed at him before were now silent, caught off guard by the unexpected beauty. Tom played on, not noticing the audience, absorbed in his own world of sound. When the last note faded, he looked up and found Mia still smiling. "Thank you," she said softly. "You should play more for everyone. People need this." Tom nodded, feeling a spark of something he had not felt in a long time. Perhaps the streets were not just a place to survive. Perhaps they could be a place to connect, to share something meaningful. Music, he realized, was a bridge between people, even strangers. It could turn an ordinary street corner into something extraordinary. He packed his keyboard carefully, ready to continue his day. But for the first time in months, he felt lighter, hopeful, and noticed the small but real difference one listener could make. As Mia waved goodbye and continued on her way, Tom knew he would play again tomorrow and the next day, and maybe, just maybe, people would begin to see more than just a homeless man on the corner. Days passed, and Tom returned to the same street corner every morning. The city was waking up around him, with buses rumbling down the streets, bicycles weaving through traffic, and shopkeepers opening their doors. But Tom's little corner felt like a quiet island in the busy world. His small keyboard rested on its stand, and he carefully checked the keys before starting. Mia appeared almost every morning now. She would smile, place a small snack beside him, and sit quietly on the curb. She never interrupted his playing, but her presence was comforting. Tom had grown used to being invisible, ignored by most people, and her gentle attention was a small light in the grayness of his daily life. The first few days, only Mia watched. But soon other people began to notice the music. A man waiting for the bus stopped to listen. A young girl tugged at her father's sleeve and pointed at Tom. Curious students from the nearby school leaned against a fence, listening to the notes that seemed to make the city feel softer. Even people who had laughed at him before slowed down, their expressions shifting from mockery to surprise. Tom's music was not flashy, and he did not play for applause. Each melody was full of care, simple but powerful. His fingers moved over the keys with a skill that could only come from years of practice and deep understanding. The melodies were gentle but strong, full of feeling and memory. People could sense the honesty in every note. Some whispered to each other, amazed that such talent could exist in such an unexpected place. One afternoon, a man leaned closer. He was middle-aged, with glasses and a notebook in his hand. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Do you play professionally?" Tom shook his head, unsure if he should speak. "I used to," he admitted softly. His voice was low, almost like a secret. The man's eyes widened. "You used to? But you play like a master. This is incredible." Tom smiled faintly. He had learned long ago not to expect praise, but it felt nice to be recognized. He began another tune, letting the music speak for him. The man listened, taking notes quietly, clearly impressed. A few more people had gathered, drawn by the sound and the small crowd forming. That day, Tom realized something important. His music had power. It could change the mood of the street, make people stop and notice the world around them, even for a few minutes. He had been hidden for so long, unseen and forgotten. But now, through his music, he could connect with people again. Even with the growing audience, Tom stayed humble. He did not ask for more than small coins or snacks. He did not seek fame or recognition. He simply wanted to play, to share what he had inside. And the people responded. They brought food, sometimes a warm drink, or simply smiled and nodded in appreciation. The kindness was small but meaningful, and it reminded Tom of a time when the world felt safe and welcoming. At night, Tom would sit quietly in a nearby park, thinking about the day. He remembered his years as a famous pianist, the bright lights, the applause, and the grand stages. That life felt distant, almost like a dream. The streets were very different, rougher and quieter, but there was something honest about them. Here, his music mattered not because of his name, but because of the feeling it carried. The next morning, more people stopped to listen. Children brought friends, and even shopkeepers paused to hear the notes flowing from his keyboard. Tom played longer now, encouraged by the smiles and attention. Every melody became a conversation with the world, a way to remind people that beauty could exist in unexpected places. And through it all, Mia remained at the curb, always encouraging, always listening. She never laughed or judged. She simply appreciated the music, and that simple act made Tom feel that he had a place in the world again. The quiet corner that had once seemed empty and lonely now felt alive, full of possibility and small moments of connection. For the first time in years, Tom felt hope. He realized that perhaps the streets were not only a place of survival, but also a place of rediscovery. His music could reach people who never expected to hear it. And for the first time, he thought that maybe, just maybe, his life could change in ways he had not imagined. As the sun dipped low, painting the city in golden light, Tom packed up his keyboard and walked slowly toward the park. The streets were quieter now, and the sound of his own footsteps filled the air. He found a worn bench under a large tree and sat down, letting the memories come unbidden. Tom's mind wandered back to years when his life had been very different. He could still see the bright lights of grand concert halls, the polished wooden floors and the velvet curtains framing a stage. People had filled the seats, leaning forward in anticipation, eager to hear him play. The applause had been thunderous, shaking the hall with excitement. He remembered the feeling of pride, of being recognized, of knowing that his music had touched thousands of hearts in a single night. He remembered traveling to different cities, walking through airports and seeing his name printed in newspapers and magazines. People had spoken of his talent as if it were magic. Every note he played had been precise, flawless, and admired. But with all that applause and recognition, Tom had often felt a quiet emptiness inside. Fame had brought attention, but not always joy. There had been loneliness, long nights in empty hotel rooms, and a constant pressure to perform perfectly. The memories of war came too, sharper and more painful. Tom had served in the army, and the things he had seen there had changed him forever. When he returned home, he found it hard to play with the same passion. The grand halls, the bright lights, and the cheering crowds felt distant, almost unreal. Music had been his comfort, his friend, but the world he once loved seemed smaller, less certain. He had walked away from the stage, slowly fading from public memory. Yet here on the city streets, with his small keyboard and his quiet corner, Tom found a different kind of connection. The notes he played were not for critics or fans. They were for people who really listened, who felt something without needing to know his name or past. Every melody was a story not of fame, but of life itself, its struggles, its quiet joys, and its unexpected beauty. Tom closed his eyes and imagined the concert halls again, but this time he played for them in his mind, not for an audience but for himself. Each note was softer, more personal, filled with the wisdom of years. He realized that the music he now shared on the street had a depth it never had before. Life had shaped him, and his experiences had given him something stronger than applause, a way to touch hearts without pretense. A small breeze rustled the leaves above, and Tom felt a sense of peace. He remembered the little joys, the simple moments that had once been overshadowed by fame and duty. Watching children play, hearing the laughter of strangers, or simply seeing a kind face. These were the moments that truly mattered. Now, as he played on the street, he could see those moments reflected in the eyes of the people who stopped to listen. He thought of Mia, and the way she always sat quietly, appreciating his music. She had reminded him that even in a city full of strangers, a single person's kindness could make a difference. He smiled softly, realizing that he no longer played for recognition or praise, but to share something beautiful, something real. Music had become a bridge between his past and present, between his memories and the people around him. As night approached, Tom packed up his keyboard and walked slowly through the park. The city lights twinkled like stars, and he felt a quiet sense of hope. The past was part of him, shaping who he was, but it no longer held him back. He could carry the lessons of glory and loss into each day, into each melody he played on the street. For the first time in a long while, Tom felt whole. He understood that life was not only about grand stages or applause, but about moments of connection, simple kindness, and the courage to continue, even when the world had seemed to forget him. He took a deep breath, feeling the night air fill his lungs, and knew he would return tomorrow to his corner, ready to share his music again, richer and wiser than before. It was another chilly morning when Tom set up his small keyboard on the familiar street corner. The city was waking up with the sounds of buses, footsteps, and distant chatter filling the air. Tom adjusted his coat and tested the keys, producing a few soft, melodic notes. The music began to flow naturally, gentle and full of feeling. Mia appeared first as usual with her warm smile and a small bag of food. She nodded to him, and he returned the gesture before letting his fingers move freely across the keys. The melodies were soft at first, then stronger, drawing attention from people passing by. Some slowed their steps. A few lingered, curious about the music that seemed so alive and personal. A man in a neatly pressed suit stopped at the edge of the crowd. He had a notebook in his hand and a calm, serious expression. He listened quietly for several minutes, his eyes focused on Tom's hands as they moved skillfully over the keyboard. Finally, he stepped closer. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I could not help but notice you're playing. You have an incredible gift." Tom looked up, surprised. People often complimented his music, but this man's attention felt different. "Thank you," Tom said softly. His voice was low but sincere. "I am Leo," the man continued. "I work in music production. I help talented musicians share their music with the world. I have been listening to you, and I think people should hear what you can do. Have you ever thought about recording your music or performing in a more formal setting?" Tom hesitated. The idea of stepping back into the world of music outside the streets felt overwhelming. Fame had once brought him applause, recognition, and excitement, but it had also brought pressure, loneliness, and memories he sometimes wished to forget. The streets had become his safe place where he could play freely without expectation. I don't know," Tom admitted, his fingers resting on the keys. "I used to play professionally many years ago, but the world has changed, and I have changed too. I play now because I love it, not for anyone else." Leo nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I see," he said gently. "You do not need to perform for anyone, but your music deserves to be heard. Even the smallest recording, or a short performance in front of a small audience, could bring your music to people who would truly appreciate it." Tom thought about it. He had spent years away from the spotlight, building a quiet life on the streets. The idea of returning to any kind of stage was intimidating. And yet, there was a spark of curiosity inside him, a small hope that maybe sharing his music beyond the street corner could bring something good. I will think about it," Tom said finally. Leo smiled, handing him a card. "There is no rush. Whenever you are ready, contact me. I only want you to share your music if you feel comfortable." As Leo walked away, Tom sat quietly for a moment, the city sounds around him, the keyboard resting on his lap. He looked at Mia, who had been watching silently, her eyes filled with encouragement. She nodded slightly as if to say this could be something good. Tom smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of nervousness and hope. For the rest of the morning, Tom played as he always had, letting the music fill the street. But now each note carried a new feeling. The possibility of something more, something beyond his usual corner, made the melodies brighter, fuller, and richer. Passers-by stopped to listen, unaware that the small keyboard player they had watched for weeks was once a master of grand stages. At the end of the day, Tom packed up his keyboard slowly. He walked through the city streets thinking about the offer. He realized that life sometimes gave second chances when least expected. He could stay on the streets as he had for so long, or he could take a small step forward, sharing his music in new ways. Either choice would be safe, but one offered the possibility of new connections and experiences. That night, Tom sat on his small bench, reflecting on the day. The memory of grand concert halls, applause, and bright lights returned briefly, but they no longer felt intimidating. Instead, they reminded him that he had once touched many hearts and could do so again, even in a different way. With a deep breath, Tom made a decision. He would not rush, but he would not ignore the opportunity either. Music had always been his true companion, his voice and his bridge to others. If the chance arose to share it more widely, he would take it carefully, thoughtfully, and with gratitude. And for the first time in a long while, Tom went to sleep feeling a quiet excitement. Life might be about to change, and he was ready to play again, not just for survival, but for something greater, something meaningful. A few days after meeting Leo, Tom found himself standing outside a small cafe. The sign above the door read Sunrise Cafe, and through the windows warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Inside, a few tables were occupied by early customers sipping coffee and reading newspapers. Tom felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation as he carefully set up his keyboard at the corner of the room. Mia had accompanied him. She helped adjust the small stand and placed a bottle of water nearby. "You will be amazing," she said softly, smiling at him. "Just play like you do on the street. People will love it." Tom nodded, grateful for her encouragement. He had been unsure if performing indoors in front of strangers who expected more than curiosity would feel comfortable, but Mia's confidence in him made the fear feel smaller. When the cafe manager came to greet him, he smiled warmly. "We are excited to hear you play," he said. "Just relax and let the music flow. People are here to enjoy it." Tom nodded again, taking a deep breath. The keyboard felt familiar beneath his fingers, and soon the first notes escaped, gentle and soft. At first, the room was quiet. Some customers looked up from their coffee or books, curious but cautious. Tom's hands moved slowly at first, testing the keys and the acoustics of the cafe. Then the melody began to grow, richer and more confident. It was simple, flowing, and full of feeling. Each note carried the years of practice, the hardships, and the quiet joy he had rediscovered. Mia watched from the corner of the room, her eyes bright with admiration. She had heard him on the street, but here, in this warm room, the music felt alive in a new way. Customers began to notice, leaning forward, listening intently. A woman at a table whispered to her friend, "This is beautiful. He plays like a professional." Tom smiled faintly but did not stop to respond. His music spoke for him. The cafe seemed to change as he played. The sound of clinking cups and conversation faded. Only the music remained, wrapping the room in a quiet warmth. People's faces softened. Some closed their eyes, letting the melodies touch them. Tom felt a strange but welcome feeling rise in his chest. For the first time in years, he experienced the thrill of performing not for coins or survival, but for the simple joy of sharing his music. As the last note faded, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause filled the space. It was gentle at first, then stronger as more people joined in. Tom looked up, surprised and pleased by the reaction. The cafe manager clapped and smiled. "That was wonderful," he said. "You brought life to this place." "Thank you." Customers came forward, offering compliments, smiles, and even a few tips. Tom accepted them politely but kept his focus on the keyboard, ready to play another melody. Each piece he played seemed to fill the room with warmth and connection. Even the shyest listeners leaned in, captivated by the emotion in the music. After an hour, Tom took a short break and sat at a small table. Mia handed him a cup of tea and he sipped it gratefully. "You did it," she said softly. "You shared your gift and people felt it. They can see who you are through your music." Tom nodded, feeling a quiet pride. He realized that this was different from the streets. Here people listened with attention, not curiosity or pity. They appreciated the music for what it was, and he felt truly heard. By the time the cafe began to close for the day, Tom had played several pieces. He packed up his keyboard slowly, feeling lighter than he had in years. Outside, the street was quiet and cool, but he no longer felt alone. The first step into a new kind of performance had been successful. Walking home, Tom thought about what had happened. Leo's encouragement, Mia's support, and the cafe audience had reminded him of the power of music. It could connect people, heal hearts, and create hope. For the first time in a long while, he felt ready to share his talent more openly, carefully, and with purpose. Tom smiled faintly as he continued down the street. Life had given him a second chance, and he was beginning to realize that his music could change more than his own life. It could touch others, inspire them, and bring joy where it was needed most. And for the first time in a long while, Tom felt that anything was possible.